Is here to sunny Florida. The migrant caravan swells to 7,000 as President Trump threatens to cut or reduce aid to 3 Central American countries. The president says he's not satisfied with Saudi explanations about a dead journalist. Part 2 of my exclusive interview with the Saudi foreign minister. And Florida politics. We talk to candidates and voters live from Tampa. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Brett Baer. We're coming to you live tonight from Tampa, Florida. Early voting began today here in the Sunshine State, which is home to several big races in the midterm elections just 2 weeks from today, from tomorrow, really. We'll have extensive live coverage in a few minutes. But first up, that migrant caravan. It has swollen by thousands since we last talked. And the president is threatening major financial consequences for 3 Central American countries he says have failed to stop their people from joining. The president is also unhappy that Mexico has not done more. We have Fox team coverage. John Roberts at the White House with immigration politics and how that plays into the midterms potentially. First up tonight, though, national correspondent William Lajeunesse in southern Mexico, just north of the Guatemalan border. Good evening, William.
Well, good morning, or excuse me, good evening, Brett. I'll tell you right now that this caravan, it stretches for miles in both directions below. Today, the heat was extreme. The walk was exhausting. There were a lot of ambulances, there were a lot of crying babies, a lot of people nursing blisters on their feet. But honestly, this is only day 2 in Mexico, and it promises to be a long haul ahead for those who take it. A showdown heading towards the U.S. border as the migrant caravan began moving some 25 miles north Monday, helped by Mexicans offering food, water, and transportation.
You know, like these people's doing right now. Look at them. They got good hearts.
Since leaving Honduras last week, organizers say the group doubled in size to more than 7,000. Some applied for asylum here, but most say they want to enter the U.S., legally or not, despite the president's warning.
This is not going to be easy. But, you know, it's a lot of people. I don't think he's going to be able to stop everybody.
After first telling President Trump it would stop the caravan, Mexico reversed course, overwhelmed by sheer numbers and wanting to avoid a violent confrontation. The immigrants also know the U.S. cannot catch or deport them all, releasing hundreds of Central Americans each day because of court decisions and a lack of shelter space.
I don't know if we're gonna apply for asylum. You know, that depends if we can get there first. You know, but my dream is get through the border.
That remains some 1,400 miles away, or roughly a 3-month walk. Migrants hope buses or the train will cut that time in half. Their final destination, we're told, California, not Arizona or Texas. Mexico says roughly 1,000 families applied for asylum here. If approved, they can stay in Mexico to live and work. The United Nations Refugee Agency is helping process those claims, but also makes the distinction between migrants fleeing crime and poverty versus likely victims of racial, religious, or political persecution.
Migrants are the ones that willingly are leaving their countries to pursue a better future, as you mentioned. While refugees are people that they don't have the possibility to go back, either because they will face death or retaliation.
What we're honestly witnessing here, Brett, is an exodus from Honduras, Guatemala, and even some from El Salvador. The people there say they have basically, because of poverty, crime, and corruption, they have no hope, they have no wages, and they have nothing to lose, and that's why they continue to come. Back to you.
William Lajeunesse live along Mexico's border with Guatemala. William, thank you. Well, he's not denying it. The president is clearly using immigration politics to whip up his base ahead of the November elections. And he says he won't stand for that caravan getting in to the U.S. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has that part of the story tonight, live from the North Lawn. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. The caravan and immigration will be front and center when the president holds a campaign rally in Houston, Texas tonight. Illegal immigration along our southern border is up 30% over last year. And the president believes he has a powerful motivating factor to get voters out to the polls. On his way out of the White House, President Trump today said Central American nations stand to lose hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. aid if they don't stop repeated migrant caravans from heading to the United States.
We have been giving so much money. When we ask them to keep their people in their country, they're unable to do it. It's called Make America Great Again.
President Trump today also doubled down on his unverified assertion that there are criminals, even Middle Easterners, among the caravan's population, challenging journalists to go look for themselves.
John, take your camera, go into the middle, and search. You're going to find MS-13, you're going to find Middle Eastern, you're going to find everything. And guess what? We're not allowing them in our country. We want safety.
The president again threatened today to engage the U.S. military to shut down the border, tweeting, "I have alerted Border Patrol and military that this is a national emergency. Must change laws." In a push to motivate the Republican base, President Trump is laying blame for the caravan at the feet of the Democrats for refusing his efforts to reform immigration laws. In a joint statement, Senator Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi firing back, the president is desperate to change the subject from health care to immigration because he knows that health care is the #1 issue Americans care about. President Trump is also awaiting word from American teams sent to Saudi Arabia and Turkey to gather information about the death of Jamal Khashoggi. But the president is not convinced by what he's hearing so far.
I will know very soon, and I am not satisfied with what I've heard.
On Sunday, the president spoke with Turkish President Erdogan. In a post-call statement, Turkey saying the two leaders agreed on the need to clear up the Jamal Khashoggi incident with all aspects. And Erdogan promised a full accounting of Khashoggi's death tomorrow.
We seek justice here. It will be revealed in all its nakedness, not with some ordinary steps, in all its nakedness.
Whether Turkey will exculpate or point the finger of blame at Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is not known. But the White House aide who was closest to him today had advice for MBS.
Just to be transparent, to be fully transparent. The world is watching. This is a very, very serious accusation and a very serious situation.
Short time ago, the press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, revealed that the president spoke with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, yesterday by telephone. She said in that call, the president, quote, demanded answers and said that he will determine how to respond when he, quote, has all the information he needs. Brett?
John Roberts live from the North Lawn. John, thanks. Now for more on the Saudi situation from Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir. He spoke with me yesterday from Riyadh. This is part 2 of our conversation in which he denied the Crown Prince had any knowledge of an operation that eventually killed Saudi columnist Jamal Khashoggi.
Our history as Saudi Arabia for the past 80 plus years since the founding of the modern Saudi state, we have never engaged in such behavior, and we will never engage in such behavior. This is an aberration, this is a mistake, this is a criminal act, and those responsible for it will be punished.
You know that people are just not buying this story, at least not yet. And even the White House is expressing privately some real reservations about how this is being laid out. What was the original plan for Jamal Khashoggi in that consulate? What was supposed to happen?
They were supposed to go and talk to him. They were supposed to try to persuade him to come back to Saudi Arabia, and then things went awry. The unit that was doing this was a unit that was operating on this basis without having to go back and seek authorities in order to engage with people who are outside Saudi Arabia. And I think that what happened is they exceeded their authority. I think what we know is that there was an altercation, and as a consequence, he was killed.
So the story that this autopsy specialist, Dr. Salah Al-Tubaiji, comes in with a bone saw to the situation, is that true, not true?
I don't know. I would refer you to the public prosecutor. I believe that all of the facts will be revealed when they have been established, so I don't want to comment on speculation.
You don't know where the body is, though?
We don't know where it is. We're trying to determine what happened to it, and I think there are some leads that the investigators are pursuing, and I don't want to speculate in terms of how they do their job, but the leads are being pursued by both our investigators and the Turkish investigators.
If this really hurts U.S.-Saudi relations, what do you think that means for the region?
Well, first of all, I believe that when the facts are out, people will realize that the Saudi government had nothing to do with this. This was a rogue operation committed by people who exceeded their authorities and then tried to cover up their crime, and for that they will be referred to the courts and they will be punished. So that is one. Number two, I think the relationship between our two countries is one of huge strategic value. We have a great trade relationship. We have a great military-to-military relationship. We work very closely together on countering extremism and terrorism, including in the fight against ISIS in Syria and Al-Qaeda in Yemen and Afghanistan, Pakistan. We work very closely on trying to stabilize the region. We have very strong ties in terms of energy, very strong ties in terms of people to people, and I believe that every time our two countries have worked very closely together, they have been able to change the world.
Mr. Minister, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Back here in the U.S., President Trump says he is taking a serious look at transgender policies. He mentioned it during his walk to the helicopter today. A published report says he's considering a new definition of gender that would reverse some federal civil rights protections for transgender individuals. It says the Health and Human Services Department would define gender as an immutable biological condition determined by a person's sex organs at birth. LGBT leaders are pledging legal challenges if that goes forward. National Security Advisor John Bolton meets with the Russian President Vladimir Putin tomorrow. Bolton had held talks with top Russian officials today following the announcement President Trump will withdraw the U.S. from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. The president says Russia has violated that deal. A Russian official says his country is ready to consider mutual complaints about the INF. Bolton is also discussing an extension of the START weapons treaty by 5 years. In America's election headquarters tonight, we told you a moment ago, early voting began here in Florida today. It started Saturday in Nevada. A short time ago, former President Barack Obama held a rally in Las Vegas to gin up enthusiasm for Democrats running in close races for the Senate, the House, and the governor's office there. Correspondent Peter Ducey is in Las Vegas tonight.
Hello, Nevada!
Barack Obama won Nevada twice, but Senator Dean Heller, trying to win re-election against Congresswoman Jackie Rosen, thinks that's plenty.
The big difference between her and I, she'd take us back to the Obama era.
Today, she did.
Unlike some, I actually try to state facts. I believe in facts.
The former Democratic president is currently the party's top surrogate, and he rallied for Rosen on the campus of UNLV.
If Republicans keep Congress this fall, you better believe they are coming after health care again. And millions of people across the country who count on this are not going to have it. Even Republicans, they just don't know it.
Senator Heller thinks Rosen's special guest will miss the mark.
Nevada was wiped out under the Obama administration. We had 60% of our homes. 60% of the homes were underwater here in the state.
2 years into his first term, with the 2010 elections approaching, President Obama had a 45% approval rating, and Democrats lost the House. 2 years into President Trump's first term, with the 2018 elections approaching, his approval rating is 2 points higher, 47%, and he's trying to use it to help Heller.
I have to thank Dean Heller for helping us with Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh. Dean Heller was there.
Rosen is trying to paint Heller as too tight with Trump.
He's rubber-stamped every one of Trump's nomination without even giving it a second thought. Nevada's won an independent voice.
Heller dismisses that charge as empty rhetoric and believes the tax reform bill is a bigger issue to voters here than ties to Trump. In the first 2 days of early voting, Democratic voters cast 45% of the ballots. Republicans cast 36%. But Senator Heller likes his chances because he thinks the Kavanaugh confirmation chaos kept the GOP excited just long enough.
Let me tell you what my concern on all this was is that Kavanaugh happened too quick. I wanted that momentum to continue to early voting, to the first day of early voting, and it has occurred.
President Obama's pitch here on behalf of Democratic candidates was less about their records and more about his own, especially when he was talking about the economy. But the crowd ate it up. Roughly 2,000 people came to hear him speak. That is less than half, though, the size of the crowd that President Trump attracted on Saturday up in Elko, Nevada. Brett?
Peter Ducey live in Las Vegas. Peter, thank you. Stocks were mixed today. The Dow lost 127. The S&P 500 dropped 12. The Nasdaq gained 20. Up next from Tampa, some major races here in Florida next month. We will talk to the candidates and voters about what to expect. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox Carolina in Greenville, as about 30 people are taken to hospitals after a floor collapsed during a party at a condominium clubhouse near the campus of Clemson University. Dozens of people tumbled into the basement. One partygoer tells a local newspaper people were jumping to a popular song when that floor caved in. The school says 6 students remain hospitalized tonight with non-life-threatening injuries. Fox 10 in Phoenix says the Mega Millions jackpot climbs to, get this, $1.6 billion with a B. No one matched all the numbers in Friday's drawing, so they will try again Tuesday night. And this is a live look at New York from Fox 5, our affiliate there. One of the big stories there tonight, the New York City Police Department has suspended use of one model of body camera after an explosion late Saturday night. The department says an officer removed the camera after noticing smoke coming from it. The device then exploded. No one was hurt. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We're outside the Beltway, too. We'll be back here to Tampa after this. Welcome back to Tampa. There are 2 races here in Florida with major national implications. One is for U.S. Senate, where Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson is trying to hang on to his seat and keep Democrats at least in the running for the Senate majority. We'll talk live with Republican candidate Governor Rick Scott in just a moment. The other big contest is for governor, with former Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis taking on Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum. I spoke with Mayor Gillum today at a rally at the University of South Florida and asked him about his level of confidence.
I honestly have to tell you, I feel good. It's not because of any polls or anything like that. I always take my cues from the ground. I take the pulse of people. It's one of the reasons why we made it successful through the primary. When none of the polls showed anything with us prevailing, we knew something was happening at the grassroots level. So what I've told our supporters, look, the only poll that matters is the one on election day.
There's Florida-specific issues here, like the algae blooms. Yes. You talked about that in that debate last night. Yeah. It's a big deal for Floridians.
It is a big deal. And quite frankly, we're seeing even in more conservative areas of our state that if typically Democrats would never visit, Martin County, for instance, I went down there thinking we might have 200 folks at a rally, over 1,500 people in the hot blazing sun. A number of them came up to me, told me they were Republicans, but were disappointed that over the last several years it feels like the environment has really gone the way of the biggest polluters. And so we've got to do something about it, not only for those folks who own real estate there, but clearly for the tourism state. People come here from all over our beautiful beaches. Not very attractive if you've got to fight guacamole content blue-green algae.
At a debate in Tampa last night, the GOP nominee, Congressman Ron DeSantis, went after Gillum for following Bernie Sanders' policy playbook.
I'm thinking about the hardworking taxpayers, and I think Andrew has a different agenda that's more in tune with his left-wing ideology.
The criticism of you is that people perceive you as kind of a Bernie Sanders Democrat, and that scares some moderates, maybe.
Sure.
How do you fight that?
Well, one, I endorsed Hillary Clinton. I was proud to accept the endorsement of Bernie Sanders, the endorsement of President Obama, of Democrats on the right, middle, and left. And I think what our candidacy shows is that we've got the ability to bring together the entirety of our coalition. The other thing is I'm going everywhere. Democratic, Republican areas, middle ground areas. I'm sharing with people what my record is. I'm the mayor of a city that is the fastest growing economy in the state of Florida per capita, one of the fastest growing in the nation. People have, my opponent have tried to call me socialist and all these other things, completely out of the range of who I am. I'm a capitalist. I believe in business, but also believe in people. And I don't believe that they are contradictory.
You've got 15 days.
Yes.
What's your closing message to Florida?
Well, as I shared with Floridians last night, don't care who's on the other side of Florida, I am always Team Florida, whether that's a former congressman or president of the United States. This is about what we're going to do to expand access to health care, what we're going to do to create an economy where people can work one job instead of multiple jobs as a way to make ends meet, what we're going to do to clean up our environment. We got to make that a priority here in this state if we plan to grow Florida into the kind of top shelf state that I know we can be.
Our thanks to Mayor Gillum for the time. Let's talk now with Florida Governor and Republican Senate candidate Rick Scott. He joins us from Port St. Joe. Governor, thanks for being here. I first want to get an update from you of hurricane recovery and what you're doing down there.
Sure. Well, I'm down here at a base camp for Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. I've got officers here that save people's lives. The night of the storm, which is almost 2 weeks ago now, in the middle of down tree lines, down power lines, they came out and started saving people's lives. They did rescues all night long, and they've saved a lot of people's lives. So I'm here having dinner with them, just thanking them for what they've done. I have 4,000 members of the National Guard I've called up. I've got thousands of people from all sorts of state agencies here just saving people's lives and trying to restore our state. We've got a lot of people, though, still without power, 67,000 people without power. We've got a lot of people that have lost their homes. So my job right now is to organize state, federal, and local efforts to make sure every family gets all that they deserve and all that they need to get back to a normal life as fast as we can. And that's what I'm doing right now. And I want to thank these officers because they save people's lives, and I'm very proud of them.
Yeah, Governor, you know, you've been weathered a lot of these storms. This was a big one. What's your assessment of the response and how it's gone so far as you look at what's left down there?
Well, today I've been in 5 counties. We had 11 counties really impacted by this storm, all different. The northern counties were impacted with unbelievable tree damage. The coast was 14 foot of storm surge. I was at Mexico Beach a little earlier today, and everybody is working hard. Everything I've asked out of the president, he's come through. Everything I've asked from FEMA, they've come through. FEMA's traveling with me, but we got a lot of work to do. Our local mayors, our county commissioners, our sheriffs, our police chiefs, I'm talking to them on a daily basis, and we're coordinating all of our activities so every family has a chance to get back to a normal life. So I'm proud of what everybody's done, but there's a lot of work to do. It's like a gigantic tornado just ripped through this part of our state and impacted a lot of people.
You know, you've essentially suspended the campaign while you're dealing with this. CNN just had a poll out this week saying your response to Hurricane Michael, approval 64%, disapproval 17%. RCP has your Senate race. You're trailing by about 2.4 to Senator Nelson. What's your assessment of the race? And you're coming down to 15 days now. Are you going to get back full campaigning?
Well, Brett, my job is to be the governor. I got elected to do my job as governor, and that's what I'm doing. Today, I was in Gadsden, Liberty, Calhoun, Bay, and now Gulf County. I'm here to help families. I've got to do my job, and that's what I'm doing. I'm thinking about. When I think about this, I think about my mom. I grew up in a very poor family. We lived in public housing. What would my mom want her governor to do? She'd want her governor to show up and make sure they get housing back, make sure their kids are back in school, make sure they've got food and water, just do all these things to get them back to a normal life. That's what I think about. I think about there's a lot of people like my mom out there. I'm going to show up every day to take care of my mom.
So, I asked Mayor Gillum about the algae bloom situation, which is a Florida story. Has it changed after Hurricane Michael?
Well, here's what's interesting. We put up state resources for a federal project. The dike at Lake Okeechobee is a 100% federal project. I couldn't get Barack Obama or Bill Nelson to do anything to help get rid of that. And so all that algae comes out of the lake. So I've been putting up state resources to do it. finally, when President Trump gets elected, I sat down with him and said, I need the resources. And so he worked with me. We now have all the resources to fix the dike Lake Okeechobee. So in 4 years, when that's done, you won't see any more algae. But it's been frustrating. Bill Nelson, he puts an ad up saying, oh yeah, he wants to get rid of the algae, and he's been in office for 42 years. He has never done anything to help me with the environment, to help it's not to help me, it's helped the citizens of the state to make our environment better.
Last thing, Governor, and I asked this to Mayor Gillum, what's your closing argument in the last 2 weeks here, even as you're dealing with this hurricane?
Well, I'm going to do my job, and this is the difference between Bill Nelson and me. I got elected to do a job. I'm going to do my job. All right? If you want more jobs, if you want a better economy, you focus on somebody that wants to get something done. If you want somebody that just, is going to be a career politician, that's what Bill Nelson's done. Never done anything on the environment, nothing on education. He'll raise your taxes. He's done nothing in 42 years. And I think it's going to be a clear choice, and that's why we're going to have a big win on November 6th. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do every day is do what I should be doing, and that's what Bill Nelson should be doing. He should be down here also, help me with trying to make sure we get the money to fix Tyndall. Tyndall got decimated. Make sure that FEMA's doing their job. Make sure you coordinate activities. But no, he's campaigning instead of being down here helping citizens in our state.
Well, Governor Scott, we appreciate you taking the time today, and we'll follow your efforts. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Brett. Have a good night.
When we come back, we'll talk to Florida voters to find out what issues really matter most to them. Special report live from Tampa continues in a moment. Welcome back to Tampa. When we take Special Report on the road during campaign seasons, we always like to talk to real voters, people like you, to find out what's on your mind and what issues may influence your vote. Tonight, we introduce you to 3 voters with plenty to say. Rochelle Warmuth from Palm Harbor wants a candidate to cheer for. The bookkeeper and mother of 3 says with the midterms approaching, politics dominates discussion at home.
Our kids grew up in politics.
The issues driving her this election?
The economy and education and educating our young people to vote today.
Rochelle studies each candidate but thinks she'll vote Republican across the board this year. She no longer trusts polls.
I was with a group of ladies not long ago, and one of them brought up and said, Rochelle, when are the survey calls going to stop? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, I got 3 of them today. I finally started telling them the opposite of what they wanted to hear.
Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can't believe the polls out there either. I mean, look at Trump's race 4 years ago. He was listening.
Vito Sheely works for a nonprofit in St. Petersburg. He has 2 teenagers.
My grandmother was an educator. My aunts and uncles all were educators, and that was something that was instilled in me.
Education is important for him, too, as he looks at candidates. But Vito says making sure people don't fall through the cracks, even in an improving Florida economy, is the most important.
We really need to focus on the increase in the living wage, having to work 2 to 3 jobs just to put food on the table. Most people here, especially in the state of Florida, are 1 paycheck away from, disaster.
What is truly the American way?
Vito thinks Mayor Andrew Gillum could shake things up in the state.
I think Gillum has run a pretty good race. I think the fact that he came from the bottom all the way to being the gubernatorial nominee speaks a lot.
Ida Vasquez Soto is a 20-year-old student at the University of South Florida. She's a first-generation college student. Her parents came here from Cuba in 1993.
I've been watching the media relations that Gillum has versus DeSantis.
As for issues driving her, the economy and health care.
Florida in particular didn't take the Medicaid expansion, so something that's going to be watched very closely in the coming election is how governors respond to the healthcare crisis, especially with rising premiums.
In the governor's race, Ida is clear.
Gillum's policies are unappealing to me. I think they're borderline socialist.
But she's actually not overly thrilled with any candidate this year.
My generation, which is Gen Z, we're most disaffected by both parties. They just don't feel like either party represents them, and I think my generation is going to keep following that track. They would like more moderate candidates who preserve fiscal responsibility while also giving individuals the freedoms to, say, marry who they want or smoke what they want.
Our thanks to those voters. Up next, we'll talk live with two Florida political reporters about the coming midterms. First, beyond our borders tonight, one of Taiwan's fastest passenger trains derailed Sunday on a curve along a popular weekend route. At least 18 people were killed there and more than 170 injured. No immediate word on the cause of that accident. Congo's military says rebels killed 15 civilians and abducted a dozen children in an attack at the epicenter of the latest deadly Ebola outbreak. The violence there is forcing crucial virus containment efforts to be suspended. Confirmed Ebola cases have now reached 202 in this outbreak, including 118 deaths. And Jordan's King Abdullah II says he has decided not to renew parts of his country's landmark peace treaty with Israel. Abdullah says he will not renew a provision of the 1994 deal allowing Israel to lease two small areas for 25 years. The leases expire next year. No reaction yet from Israel. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back to Tampa. Welcome back to Tampa. Let's bring in our special Florida politics panel here in Tampa. Adam Smith is political editor for the Tampa Bay Times, and Craig Patrick is political editor for Fox 13 Tampa Bay. Thank you guys for being here.
Sure. Welcome to God's country.
Well, yeah, thank you. And the sunshine's much better than up north. Let's look at this governor's race. The Real Clear Politics average has Andrew Gillum up about 3.7. I went to a rally today. Obviously, he's got fired up supporters. What's the real skinny in this race, how it's breaking down?
You know, it's very hard to poll a midterm election like this. I think Andrew Gillum is counting on some unlikely voters to turn out. But we do know that in midterm elections, Democrats just don't turn out nearly as well as Republicans do in the state.
Yeah, Craig?
Well, look, you have Rick Scott winning by 1 percentage point 4 years ago, 1.2% 4 years before that. The last Democratic governor, Lawton Chiles, by 1.6%. I think the actual returns will be something more along the lines of that. Like many places, I think this will be a referendum one way or the other on President Trump. But there are also some big, important issues that I think will drive voting behavior across the state, particularly south of Tampa, from West Palm Beach over to Fort Myers. I would say that the toxic algae and the water pollution crisis would be first and foremost.
Yeah, which is interesting. It's a Florida story. You have to kind of explain it to the rest of the nation, but it's really big here. Another issue is health care. Take a listen to the debate last night, these two candidates.
Andrew's for this concept Medicare for all, which is a euphemism, because if you read it, it actually abolishes Medicare for seniors. It abolishes Medicare Advantage. It abolishes TRICARE, and as a veteran, I know that military families depend on it. If you get your insurance through your employer, it abolishes that.
If we expand Medicaid here in the state of Florida, we will extend access to health care for over 800,000 of the most medically needy Floridians. 800,000. And by doing so, we'll be able to pull down $6 billion from the federal government.
All right, so, I mean, the difference of the two, clear. Healthcare plays big here.
Huge. That seems to be consistently the #1 issue in the polls, and I think it's really the thing that Gillum talks about over and over and over again. Ron DeSantis has not yet released a plan of any kind, so he has been very much playing defense.
Yeah, but Kaiser poll came out just 4 days ago showing this is one of the big issues that, again, voters are keyed into, and they are more likely, they say, to vote for a candidate who wants to expand Medicaid with federal dollars, so those federal dollars will begin to dwindle, than a candidate who does not. That appears to work to the advantage of Andrew Gillum, and he knows it, and that's why he's pressing it as much as he is in the campaign trail.
The other big race, the Senate race, we just talked to Governor Scott. Nelson in the average is up 2.4. Same kind of deal here, right? I mean, it's tough to poll, and where is his support coming from? Is it a Gillum wave that brings Nelson up?
I think there's no question if Nelson is able to squeak this out, he can thank Gillum big time, because the excitement on the Democratic side behind the candidate is all about Gillum. He's really got, especially African Americans, fired up big time, liberal Democrats fired up in a way that we really have not seen in a lot of gubernatorial cycles.
You know, we just talked to the governor. He's down there in hurricane recovery mode. He suspended essentially his campaign. Craig, how is that working, and will that sustain him for those 15 days?
Well, the governor is succeeding. He succeeded last year in terms of storm response, but I don't think that's something that's going to move the needle much. It did not move the needle much last year after Hurricane Irma, though he performed very well as governor. I think voters are keyed into ideological issues. They know the governor well, though he's getting an awful lot of name recognition across the state through earned media in leading the state in storm response. People have already made up their minds one way or the other. And once more, it goes right back to that toxic algae to our south and to our west and east. I think that can work somewhat against the governor in his own backyard.
See, I think these races are usually decided in Florida by 1 percentage point, and so there's going to be some tiny sliver that decides at the last minute. And Rick Scott is getting great marks for his performance. I think that's going to help.
Yeah, Adam, Craig, thanks so much. Veteran reporters, thank you very much. Next up, our panel in Washington with President Trump on the Immigrant Caravan and the Saudi explanation. He's not buying it in the death of that journalist. Stay with us.
Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, they're paid a lot of money. Every year we give them foreign aid, and they did nothing for us, nothing. You're going to find MS-13, you're going to find Middle Eastern, you're going to find everything. And guess what? We're not allowing them in our country. We want safety.
One can't live in Honduras paying the criminal gangs. Whatever happens to us is better than going back to Honduras. If we die along the journey, what can we do? But we don't plan to return to Honduras. We have come determined. Anything is better than returning to Honduras.
This is a big story. The Migrant Caravan, now 7,000 apparently, moving towards the U.S. border into Mexico now. Now to our panel in Washington. Matt Schlapp, contributor with The Hill, Charles Lane, opinion writer for The Washington Post, and Chris Stirewalt is politics editor here at Fox News. All right, Chris, you heard the president. How is this playing?
Well, this is a great issue for Republicans. The caravan can't possibly get here by Election Day, so they don't have to worry about actually dealing with the problem. What they have is an issue. You know, the president's in Texas tonight, and if you're somebody like Pete Sessions, who is finds himself in a first competitive race in a long time in a suburban Texas district, this story is catnip. It is perfect because it plays on all of the fears that they can count on to drive persuadable voters in these suburbs toward Republican candidates.
Yeah, Chuck, I mean, clearly immigration law, when it comes to Central America, does have these big loopholes that that this administration has been talking about for quite some time.
We have this very sad, pitiable situation, actually, in which people are being incentivized to take this long, expensive, dangerous journey from a failed state, basically, in Honduras, where life is very desperate and unsafe. And I believe they're being exploited all along the way. I think they're being exploited by human smugglers. I think they're being exploited by corrupt officials in Mexico. They're probably being exploited politically by the Honduran opposition. There's a lot going on here that, frankly, we don't fully understand. But I think they're now going to be exploited politically. The president sees, as Chris says, a terrific issue for him. The one thing about it is I think people should realize these 7,000 people were going to come piecemeal, or they were going to come in one big group. And the migration to the border has been up this year, and the loopholes or the incentives or whatever remain in place before Election Day and after Election Day and have to be addressed one way or the other.
Matt, Sarah Sanders came out and told reporters that 100% that there are suspected terrorists, unknown Middle Easterners in this caravan, saying we have 10 individuals suspected or known terrorists that try to enter our country illegally every day. She kind of defending the president's comments on that. Your thoughts on this whole caravan issue?
Well, we just have no idea. This is the problem when you have a system whereby you can rush the border and not go through the normal port of entry process, and you can rush the border. If you can put a kid with you, doesn't even have to be your own kid, you're going to be able to come into this country. It's called catch and release. You know, Brett, we picked up about 95,000 family units last year. 99% of them were released into our country and are still here. 20 years ago, it would have taken hours to repatriate them, but because the system is so clogged up and we have 4 times the number of people seeking asylee status, that there's no way for us to handle the situation. We have over 31,000 kids, unaccompanied minors that were picked up last year. 98% of them are still in this country. It is a good tactic, I hate it, but it's a good tactic to rush the southern border and to try to get some kind of temporary status, because the chances are you will stay in America for at least years or as long as you want.
Yeah, there's a lot to this story that we still don't know. The funding for all of this, where it's going to end up, and what Mexico is eventually going to do about it. Quickly, I want to go down the row on this. This is the Saudi foreign minister talking to me about the Khashoggi investigation.
The Crown Prince has denied this. The Crown Prince is not aware of this. Even the senior leadership of our intelligence service was not aware of this. This was an operation that was a rogue operation. This was an operation where individuals ended up exceeding the authorities and responsibilities they had. They made the mistake when they killed Jamal Khashoggi in the consulate, and they tried to cover up for it.
All right, I've got 30 seconds here. Down the row, Chris, Chuck, Matt, thoughts on all this?
I don't know. The president's not buying it. They're going to have to do better than that, or there's going to have to be consequences for these rogue actors, one or the other.
The Saudis continue to violate the first law of holes, which is when you're in one, stop digging. And their story just gets more complicated and less believable every day.
Yeah, when you're talking about a regime that doesn't believe in basic human rights and doesn't have a constitution, this is a terrible tragedy, and there are terrible tragedies every day with this regime, and I don't trust much of what they say.
Gentlemen, we did it. 2 topics in the time. Thank you very much. Final thoughts from Tampa when we come back. Sunset here in Tampa, gorgeous day today. Thank you, Tampa, for hosting us. And with just 15 days until the midterm election, Special Report is not done with road shows. Next Monday, we'll be live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We'll update you on the races there for governor and U.S. Senate, also some House races there. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That is it for this Special Report. Fair, balanced, and still unafraid.